Welcome, I'm Ian Bidstrup from Spinal Vet Australia. I'm delighted to be finally delivering a series of short videos on saddle fitting and saddle related pain. I'm a veterinarian who's worked with horses' back pain for over 30 years now, and saddles are an integral part of dealing with back pain. So I hope you enjoy this next episode of the series on saddles and saddle related pain. For saddle fitting, we want to put the saddle on gently on the horse. So we're going to ease it down onto their back. Some horses will be too sensitive with the saddle when there's no saddle cloth there, so you'll have to use a saddle cloth at times. Normally we get the owner to put it in place, so because we want to know where the owner's actually putting it, not just where we want to put it, because frequently the saddles are put too far forward. Not her girth, so it's going to be a bit long for her. But we'll pop it on at any rate. So we're girthing up just so it's firm. We don't want it tight, just in case the horse is girthy. We don't want to upset it too much. Now, when we examined the back before a saddle was on, she was reasonably comfortable at the surface level. When you put a saddle on, it can change, and they can be much less comfortable. And she seems to be much the same with it on or off, so that's a good sign. Now, first thing we want to do is get it in place behind the shoulder blade. And this is a critical thing. If it's not in the right place when you're checking the saddle fit, then you get the wrong impression. If it's up on the shoulder blades, it's going to be different than if it's in the correct places, which in the world standards 3 to 5 centimeters behind the back of the shoulder blade before the saddle impacts on the shoulder blade. So if it's not impinging on the shoulder blade, then you can go closer in some saddles. In others, where it's obviously a hard wall, then you have to go a little bit further away. The idea is that the shoulder blade's going to come, as the horse steps forward, the shoulder blade's going to come back into the saddle, and you want to allow that shoulder blade to move under the saddle cleanly. If it's too close against it, it's a hard wall. If it's got a little bit of movement, it's more an angular part of the scapular cartilage that can go under the saddle. So you've got to keep that in mind, that it's got to be in the right place. Too often saddles are right up against the shoulder blade or even further forward than that. So the next step that we're going to do is to check that this part of the saddle is matched to the platform it's on. So it's matched to the muscle it's on. So we're going to check under the front of the saddle with our hand and feel what the horse is feeling. And what I can feel is that this saddle is a lot tighter here at the top of the panel than it is down here, which means that the gullet plate is wider than it needs to be for this horse. So we need to compensate for that in some way. This is a Steuben saddle. Gullet plate can't be altered all that much without breaching the actual plate. If it's close enough that we can alter it in some way to have it fit well, then this saddle we can go further with. The next thing is to check that there's enough clearance through the gullet, the opening of the gullet of the saddle, and the clearance in this pommel area. We need to check that there's enough room down either side of the panels on the side of the wither. And in this case, the panel comes up fairly high into the wither and is actually coming close to the tips of the vertebrae, and as a result it's going to put pressure against the spine, against the vertebrae of the spine, in such a way that it'll be pushing inwards and potentially creating damage at the bone surface. The other thing we've got to be mindful of with saddles is the stirrup bar, because that can carry a lot of weight in the front of the saddle. It's part of the bearing area of the saddle, and that can actually impinge up close to the spine as well. And some of the stirrup bars can really bite in that region, particularly if the The tree point itself, this is the tree point. Sturgeon's got a beautiful long one, which enables support for the front of the saddle, really good support. But if that's not working well and it's too wide, as we're seeing here, this the stirrup bar carries a lot of the weight of the saddle. If we move on from there, we want to check the balance of the saddle. We want to make sure that the lowest point of the saddle in most dressage saddles is through the middle. And that's pretty much the case the way this saddle is fitting, even though we've got some alterations that need to be made to make it as comfortable as it can be. The next step we want to do, we've examined the front here, we want to examine the lengthways fit of the saddle. And we've got to be mindful that how a horse stands and how a horse works can be a different shape. They can be lifted through their work ideally, or they can be dropped through their work under the weight of a rider. So that can change how the platform for the saddle is shaped. And this is called the arc of the saddle, or the long ways shape of the horse. And in this case, when we examine here, we want to put weight on the pommel to keep some weight like a rider in the saddle. Here we want to put weight through the seat and through the cantle, and we want to feel just how much weight is coming onto our fingers. We want to feel what the back feels. And when it comes to the saddle seat area, in this case we're getting a lot of pressure just here, and it's coming away from up in a curve, and this is often done to reduce the pressure on the back of the saddle, where on the horse's back, where horses drop away, and we want to protect back of the saddle region. In this case, it's actually counterproductive for her, because it's actually going to cause her to drop her back to where there's as much pressure being felt by this region as that region, and that won't happen until she actually drops her back. Rather than lifting it into a good working frame, dropping her back, remember, is going to contribute to kissing spines, it's going to contribute to disengagement of the hind end, and numerous other problems through strain through the loin, and on it goes. Hock problems, high suspensory problems, all those things will happen if they're dipping their back too much. One of the checks that we want to do is check for rocking, and that's certainly present here. The seesawing of the saddle shouldn't happen. It should be such that it doesn't drop through the front and drop backwards and forwards. Again, it's a reflection that things aren't quite right with the tree for this horse, and also with the amount of padding. You can add flock to compensate for these problems, but really the tree has got to match the horse's back in a frame that you want the horse to work. The next step is to look at the match of the pitch of the saddle, and the pitch is referring to this area here, the actual angle of the horse's back, and we want to check whether the panels are a good match to that. And we want to again use our fingers to see what her back is feeling. And what I can feel here is this outside of the panel is not contacting her back very well. It's not really supporting the saddle, but the inside is carrying, where my fingertips are up under here, is carrying all the load, and that load is being carried close to the center of the back, so pretty closely over the spinal joints, in this case over the rib joints, and over the vertebrae itself, and over the multifidus muscles. So that's going to be uncomfortable for her in that respect too. But this is something we want to check, and this is a common situation with saddles where the load is not spread over its full capacity, and it's concentrated too much in areas like this part along the spine, and that does not do any favors for the horse, nor the rider for that matter. The next thing we want to look at is the girth point locations and how they work for her. She's got a nice athletic sort of chest where it's fairly straight through. This is an ideal situation for a Prestige A52 relaxed performance girth, one of the donut girths that you'll have seen around, because they sit down here on the sternum and are much more comfortable for horses often, and it allows you to use these two girth points. These two girth points are working well for her. For a lot of horses, when you're checking this area here, the girth will want to sit further forward because the belly is dropping a bit, and when it's sitting, you're all right, girl. Good girl. The girth will want to sit further forward, and if you've only got these two options, then the girth points will actually, the girth will be there and the girth points will be going on an angle, and that will effectively, like pulling this stirrup leather, will pull the saddle forward right onto the shoulder blade. So the saddle will be moving forward all the time and will be a real problem. For those horses to counteract that, quite often a tree point billet or girth point is added, and that comes down through here and out through there, and allows the front point to be here more and the girth more lined up with that. The back one will still be on an angle in this saddle because it hasn't got an adjustable system. As a result, there will still be some of that pull forward with those girth points. The final thing we want to look at in saddle fitting is what sort of girth is there. In this case, it's a straight through girth. It's not accent, so we won't get caught up with it too much. But we want to make sure the whole width of the girth is working for the horse, particularly at the sternal level. The sternum, actually, the chest and the rib cage comes down on this angle and then does a dive, so it's almost square through here. And it's at this point that horses get the most pain from girths quite often if they're not suitable. So we want to protect from here through particularly well. We want to have the billets and the top of the girth comfortable for the skin, because this is often an irritated area. But the critical area for pressure from the girth is down here. If we've got a horse with a drop belly and we put one of the anatomical girths that were designed for fit eventers, Olympic eventers that have got a belly that comes up this way, those girths will be floppy at the front and cut in at the back. And this happens too often and makes horses really quite tender and leads to them to be more girthy and tighter through the front end than they should be. And it's simply because a girth that was appropriate for one type of undercarriage is not appropriate at all for the average horse that drops down a lot more than this girl does here. Thanks for watching. I look forward to you joining me for the next in this series on saddle fitting.